this out. All right. So, like I said, I'm going to be working on a little bit of crossed hatching. So we just grabbed a couple supplies here. All right. So whenever you're thinking about hatching versus cross hatching, right? Remember that hatching is literally just a fancy word for just lines, right? Just kind of hatching. And then cross hatching obviously is crisscrossing those lines, right? So you get a different sense of value. Now, we've talked about a value scale before. So the idea that if I wanted to, and if you guys are finding that you're really struggling with cross-hatching specifically, this is a really good exercise. It'll take you 10 seconds and visually help you see what's going on. So what I'm going to do is kind of go through and kind of start nickel and diming this stuff across like this. Just like so. And kind of give an overall value. So I'll have kind of this overall value, right? And notice that, bless you, notice that my lines by no means are like perfectly even. I'm not using a ruler, it's just kind of freehand, right? Now, I'm going to go through, I'm going to kind of go down a little bit, right about here-ish. I'm going to start going in a different direction. So I literally am cross-hatching my lines. Go down a little bit more. This time I'm going to go in a different direction again. Remember that your different directions don't always have to be at like 45 degrees. You can go a whole lot different directions here, a whole lot of different areas. What's happening, excuse me, what's basically happening is by going in a different direction, by making my lines maybe a little bit heavier along the way, I'm slowly but surely, in essence, coloring these areas, right? It's literally just less white being shown. Right? And the less white that's there, obviously, the darker it becomes, and then vice versa, right? So not only just making my lines lighter, making them wider apart, but also the fact of adding more by cross-hatching gives me less and less lines. It's the same exact stuff you did whenever you were a kid and you're trying to color, right? You just kind of scribble, scrabble, you get little white chunks in there, and you kind of go in a different direction, right? And that's how you kind of solidify your colors. Right? So by going in different directions, each time I go in a different direction, you can see I kind of get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 different levels of value. Right? And you can get thousands of these levels of value just by cross-hatching your lines. Right? So again, it doesn't have to be perfectly even Stevens. Right? Now, let's say that I had a sphere, just like so. Right? So I've got my sphere. And I want to hatch on my sphere, all right? I want to hatch on my sphere. So, of course, hatching is going to involve just, again, these kind of straighten one-directional lines, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about where the light source is coming from. In this case, I'm going to say right about here. I'm going to think about that contour. So I was thinking about the contour of a sphere, right? So it's going to kind of bend ever so slightly. And I'm going to use those hatch lines, use those hatch lines to go through and bend with the contour, right? So there's nothing wrong with bending those lines, and obviously the more that I put, the darker it becomes. Thank you. Yeah. No, it's all right. Table please. You're up, my man. Thank you. So I'm going to go through and kind of keep hatching, right? Just like so. By bending with that contour, it's still going to give me that sense of three-dimensionality. And again, just like this value scale up top here, I kind of have 1, 2, 3 going back. Here you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm kind of stopping my pencil lines about there, right? And that'll give me this sense of bending value with hatching. If I wanted to do the exact same thing with cross-hatching, it's a little bit simpler with cross-hatching. If I want to do the exact same thing, again, I'm going to think about that contour. Just going to kind of lightly sketch it in here. Think about that contour, right? I'm going to do the exact same thing I would if I was hatching. Kind of bend those lines with the contour. Only this time, instead of just adding more, I'm just going to go in a different direction. So again, bending still with the contour. And stopping right about where that line is. Same thing, bending with the contour. Same thing, bending with the contour. And again, by kind of crisscrossing those lines, you end up with something that looks pretty valued, while at the same time really just a bunch of lines on a page, right? Have a good sense of lighting, a good sense of shadow, of chiaroscuro, and obviously we can throw on a cast shadow as well.
Would hatching or cross-hatching work for the cast shadow too?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So again, what you can think about is the contour, right? So if I want to do hatching on my table, right, the ball here, the sphere, is sitting, let's say, on a table, right? That table is very straight and flattened, right?
Yeah.
So what I can do is kind of use my lines. Notice I'm still hatching because they're still just straight lines. I'm not crossing them. But I'm going to kind of go with that table plane, which is at an angle, similar to like one-point perspective whenever you guys did that, right? Same thing here. I can just kind of go with that table plane, and then this time I can cross-hatch them. It's always going to be a little bit darker toward the base of that sphere as well, and kind of fade out in this direction. Does that make sense? Any other questions? No? Pretty straightforward stuff. Like I said, the only thing I want you guys to be cautious about is either A, going too lightly, like it doesn't have to be little wispies. You know, you can put some pencil down, but at the same time, don't think about it as a mathematical formula, right? If I have, you know, let's say like an eyeball. Okay, so if I have an eyeball, and I want to shade this eyeball, I'm going to think about where the light source is coming from. So maybe this guy's got some bags under his eyes, so I can hatch just like that and kind of let it fade out. If I want to cross hatch, I could maybe add a little cross hatching underneath his eyebrow there. Maybe I do a little cross hatching actually in the iris itself. Kind of fade it out. Right? Maybe there's a little bit of cast shadow underneath the eyelid right here, kind of casting onto the actual eye itself. Right? Again, just by varying the weight of my pencil and the directionality of my lines, I can get a pretty cool cross-hatched looking guy. If you want more lines, again, it's not coloring, right? It's using these lines to bend with the contour and show where those contrasting colors are. Even something like the eyebrow is really easy to do with cross-hatching. Like so. Pretty simplistic, right? And you get some pretty cool results pretty quickly as well, which is kind of fun. So any questions? Again, hatching is simply using line. Cross-hatching is crisscrossing those lines. Like I said, I really would suggest if you find that you guys are getting stuck at this at all, just take 10 seconds of your life and try to make a value scale, whether it's with cross-hatching or with hatching. See if you can kind of vary your lines by getting them darker and darker and applying more of them. Just like with pointillism, the more you have, the darker it gets. Cool? So you kind of end up with 1, 2, 3 different values. All right? Any questions? Like I said, very, very short demo, but I just wanted to kind of show everybody as a whole as to what we're kind of thinking about when we're talking about hatching versus cross-hatching. All right? Cool? That's it, guys. Thank you.